Welcome back to Essential Pittsburgh. I'm Paul Guggenheimer. When he entered the Allegheny County Police Academy as a recruit, returning as an instructor was probably the last thing on his mind. However, an increasing Hispanic population coupled with a need for cultural awareness for training recruits brought him back to the classroom as a teacher. Juan Polanco is helping others bridge the communication gap between Hispanic residents and law enforcement by teaching survival Spanish. Not only is this building better understanding, it's also creating cultural awareness and saving lives. Juan Polanco is a University of Pittsburgh police officer, and he joins us now here in Studio A. Juan, welcome to Essential Pittsburgh.
Thank you for having me.
What can you tell us about your background, where you grew up, and how you ended up coming to Pittsburgh?
Well, it all started in 1968. My family and I arrived in New York City from the Dominican Republic. There I lived a couple years and eventually moved to New Jersey, where I attended high school, and 8 football games changed my life and brought me here to Pittsburgh on a football scholarship.
The Dominican Republic is very well known for producing baseball players, major league caliber baseball players. But you ended up gravitating toward football. You're a big guy. Were you a big kid?
No, not really. I just ate good, and I was always physical. And I started hitting the weights at an early age, 13, 14. And that led to the football and all that.
So you finally started playing your senior year in high school. How did you end up joining the team?
That year, there was a change of coaches, and I was approached by the head coach. And he just told me, hey, give it a shot. I'll help you out and all that. And I fought him. I said, well, I don't understand the game. I'm not ready for this and all that. And he says, nah, we'll help you. And he was persistent, and I accepted the challenge, and from there, that was the season almost started. I'd almost played the 8 games, and it took off from there. According to them, I was doing the what was necessary to do, and I was amazed, because I didn't think I did anything. I was a man among boys. That's the way I used to look at it, much stronger, quicker, smarter, and that was it, basically.
They had you on the offensive line?
It was defense. It was much easier. Get the guy with the ball, they said, and I was recruited as a defensive player. And after arriving at Pitt, I was moved to the offense. They saw the potential there, the strength, the quickness, and the intellect, basically, and that's what I was told, and that's where I stayed.
And clearly, you must have mastered the technique of being a lineman, first on the defense, but then offensively, because at the University of Pittsburgh at that time, you had some great players, and you were protecting a player who would eventually go to the Hall of Fame, quarterback Dan Marino. So they weren't going to mess around with somebody that couldn't keep the bad guys away from him, right?
That's very true. That's very true. I had the privilege to be teammates of probably the best that ever played the game. Individuals like Russ Grimm, Coach Grimm, Mark May, and Jimbo Colbert, individuals like that. They were great guys. They were still friends, run into each other. And I always thank them, too, because without them, they always helped me, so it was good.
What was it like to be around the Pitt program at that time? Because the Pitt Panthers, unlike now, a struggling program, back then they were just a few years away from a national championship. They had All-Americans, and they were ranked perennially in the top 10. And there you were. What was that like?
Every year we were more or less in contention. It was us, Penn State, 1 and 2 or 3 or 4, and always one game shy. My freshman year, lost 1 game. Sophomore year, lost another game. Junior year, another 1-gamer. Senior year, that's when everything coach changed. Jackie Sherrill left us, and Foch Fazio took over, and I lost my first home game 4 years. That was different. It was very odd because I wasn't accustomed to that. And we eventually that year played in the Cotton Bowl, SMU, Greg James, Dickerson, and we lost that. It snowed in Dallas that day, and
I remember watching that. I watched that on TV.
yes. And that was it with that. Then from there, years later, more coach changes, and that's where we're at now.
But you had a great 4 years. And one thing about the city of Pittsburgh is it really appreciates its sports teams, especially those that are successful and those who play on those teams. But for you, Juan, it went both ways, and you gained an appreciation for Pittsburgh. What exactly happened that made you decide this is where I want to stay?
First of all, the people. On my visit here, I met Danny Marino and his parents. I didn't know who he was or who, anything about that. And I met them in a van, and his dad, Dan Senior, just approached me. We hit it off right away. I says, "Hey, don't stay in a hotel, stay in our home." And announced to me he lived on Parkview there, and which I did. He made a call to the coach, and that's where it all started. I said, this is really good here. The people are great. My friends back home, they knew where Pittsburgh was because of the baseball connection, Clemente and all that. I said, it was very easy for me to just make up my mind. I said, this is where I want to be. The ethics, the hardworking, just the city in itself, and that's why I'm still here today. I love the city.
You graduated from Pitt in 1983 and ended up at first working with the Juvenile Court of Allegheny County, working at the Schumann Detention Center. Describe what was going on in the city at that time and what that job was like.
It was very tough, and it got tougher. In the mid-'80s, there was a wave of new gangs coming in from L.A., and I saw innocent kids. I called them kids at the time. Friends that lived in across one street. Now one was wearing a different color, and this and that. They become enemies, and I saw the violence that brought in to the community. At one time, I had out of 13 in my cell, 9 for murder, and then that went on for years down the road until we finally put our foot down and started a gang task force and started really getting involved with this. Because at first, I think we were like in denial. These are copycats and all that. But eventually, we did a good job with that, and the violence waned very much, and in the program in itself, the juvenile court didn't have the rate of the murders and the violence. It just nothing like it was in the mid-'80s. So it's pretty low, and considering the amount of gangs that were here, that were brought here from L.A. and that. Yeah.
What kind of work did you do with the juveniles who were locked up?
Well, basically, I was in one unit, Unit G, and it consists of 13 separate cells, and I had the most aggressive out of the bunch. For you to be there, you had to have committed some violent crime. And we basically took care of them. They were locked up in there 24 hours a day. They were allowed to go to the gym. Some were not even allowed to leave the unit. They ate and did everything in the cell.
What kind of crimes are we talking about?
Murder, rape, violent, gun-related. Yes.
And they're how old?
At the time, that's before the court decided to start treating some of these crimes as adults. Some of these juveniles as adults. They were started certifying them as adults as young as 15, because the crimes they were committing, with guns, and they were very violent. And that somewhat waned, some of the violence a little bit, but still it continued because of the gang affiliations and the territories and the colors and all that. But it slowly started to calm down in the early 90s. I saw that right before I left.
But you were working in the juvenile court system during some of the worst of it.
Worse, yes, yes.
How do you reach a kid who has been brought up in such a violent culture and engaged in this type of behavior?
Well,
Murder.
the way I used to reach them, I was very truthful to them. That's what they're used to, being lied to and all that. I used my own experience. You know, I was no angel. In New York, I had some mishaps, and that's what led me to New Jersey, as a matter of fact. And I used my own experience, and day in and day out, I reassure them, hey, I did it. You can do this. And I reached a couple of kids that became, they became successful years later, and they still call me and they thank me, and that was very rewarding to me. That made it 10 years. It was worth it to me, reaching one or two, but it all starts with being truthful to these kids, reassuring that you can do it, because they're accustomed to being lied to by family members and so on and so forth. But me, that was my approach, being honest by example, and and then in return they'll talk to their other friends about you, how loyal and how nice you are, and how you treat them with the respect and admirations and that's how it took off, basically. And
We're talking with University of Pittsburgh police officer Juan Polanco, a Pitt graduate, former Pitt football player who now teaches survival Spanish to officers in the Pittsburgh area, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But first, eventually you decided after this experience with working with juveniles that you were going to go back to New Jersey, but something changed your mind. What happened?
well, some friends of mine from Schumann Center, they decided to throw me a going away party, and there I met this young lady who eventually I married, became my wife, and I unpacked and stayed once again, because really I didn't want to leave, but I thought I needed a change, and once again I just couldn't leave this place, and she helped me make up my mind pretty much, but I really deep inside I didn't want to leave, and here I am. So
You stayed in Pittsburgh. You were working construction, and then at age 40, you decided to change careers. What happened?
Well, one of my clients, name was Dr. Marge Wickerham, one day saw me working so hard and sweating, and she says, Juan, if you had an opportunity to do something else, and what? I said, well, I'd like to go back into my field and all that. She was so persistent. Every day I show up to her house to do work. And he says, remember? And one day I said, you know what? I'm going to do it. So I got on the phone and called the Allegheny County Police Academy and set a date with them to discuss the steps to attending the academy. And sure enough, I was accepted. I had medical checks and everything else, and I started the academy, and I became my class president, and here I am again. Thanks to her, and being again persistent. About the change, and here I am.
What made you want to be a cop?
Well, I more or less I noticed there is a lot of problems in certain communities, from California to New Jersey to Florida, and I said, you know what, this needs to take a different approach, policing with minorities, not just the Hispanics. And I thought, you know what, if I can make a difference somehow, and that's where the idea started, and my chief also was very instrumental in guiding me towards that. Says, if you want to, you go, let's do something. And next thing you know, I'm getting everything together in a plan to somewhat do this. with just a lot of issues involving not just the Latino community, but just the cultural aspects, especially here in Oakland. Anybody that's been in Oakland will tell you. I mean, everyone you see, 1 out of 3 people you run into comes from another nation, and we have to be sensitive towards certain cultural practices as police officers, and all that led me to do what I do with my teaching. The last thing I teach is the language per se, but most important is the cultural, the differences that we must respect that, and that's more important. You're going to learn this no matter what, but the cultural, how to deal with that, how to see it, that's the most important. The difference between a Cuban and a Dominican. We're all Latinos, but there's a big difference culturally than a Guatemalan, than a Mexican. Big difference. We might be all Hispanics or Latinos, but there's a big difference. And this is where I come in and I elaborate on that. And they always tell me, man, I didn't know that. Now you do. So that's another aspect of what I do here with this. It's the cultural. It's the most probably important out of it.
Our guest again is Juan Polanco. He's a University of Pittsburgh police officer, and he teaches survival Spanish to officers in the Pittsburgh area. We're going to talk more about that and also take some of your calls at 412-246-2002. That's 412-246-2002. I'm Paul Guggenheimer. We'll continue with more here on Essential Pittsburgh on 90.5 FM.